Hi guys and welcome back to the Mighty Blues. My name is of course Cameron and welcome back today to another live stream. It is Thursday, I hope you all are doing well. It is the latest Everton news. We're going to sit down and talk about the latest news surrounding Everton Football Club. Sean Dyche has had his pre-game press conference earlier on this afternoon ahead of Saturday's Premier League fixture against Aston Villa at Goodison Park. Reports are suggesting that Jordan Pickford is close to agreeing a new contract with Everton Football Club, a contract that will not include a relegation release clause, which is a really interesting topic to discuss, and a couple of other bits and bobs and various different sort of, things of news that have gone floating about over the last sort of 48 hours or so, including the fact that Everton have once again been fined for failure to control their players during last Saturday's fixture against Leeds United. I think that makes it 3 games on the bounce now. I'm pretty sure we were fined for the game against Arsenal as well after the altercation between Zinchenko and Neil Maupay, and I'm pretty sure we were fined for the Merseyside derby as well. In fact, I know we were fined for the Merseyside derby because that was only announced yesterday. So Everton are racking up fines at the moment, and if I'm being perfectly honest with you, Sean Dyche said it himself in the press conference, you can't ask for passion on one hand and then complain when you get it. I understand that these things are a constant in football now, which I'm not really sure why, because it didn't seem like they used to be. Prior to this season, or last season, sorry, I can't really remember any team getting fined for failure to console their players. But listen, if it means that, Everton have got to be fined in order to show passion, or if it means that, for Everton to win a game of football, we've got to show passion and fight, and that means we're going to get fined, then keep fining us. I don't give a fuck, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. But anyway, let's get straight into some of the other bits of news before we jump into that discussion. Obviously, the biggest bit of news, the biggest report coming out of the football club over the last 24 hours or so is the news that Jordan Pickford is close to signing a new contract. That was coming from Paul Dyche yesterday. We obviously have known that Jordan has been in negotiations with the football club over a new contract for a number of months, and reports suggesting just before Frank Lampard's departure that those talks had stalled and those conversations had stopped for whatever reason. There were certain reports on the internet suggesting that that wasn't to do with Jordan Pickford, and that was more to do with the football club and the football club stance on things, whether that was financially, whether that was because they had a feeling that there'd be a new manager in place and they wanted to consult that new manager before agreeing to any new deal. I'm not too sure, but there was a period, a couple of months ago where Jordan was obviously in talks with the club over a new contract, and that was revealed to the media, as well as players like Alex Iwobi and obviously Anthony Gordon before he left the football club. And then, as I said, when it got towards the end of Frank Lampard's time at the football club and things got very sort of sour and negative, those conversations seemed to maybe not die down, because of course we're not, we're ultimately not privy to what goes on behind the scenes, but certainly the reports of those conversations started to sort of die down a little bit, and then we had reports that those conversations stalled for one reason or another. Well, we have heard over the last 24 hours that Jordan Pickford is set to sign that new contract. Dominic King said Jordan Pickford is set to commit his future to Everton by signing a new long-term contract at the football club. Sean Dyche has been impressed by Pickford's attitude since taking over as manager. Paul Dyche then further reported that there is no relegation release clause in Jordan Pickford's new contract at Everton, which will run until 2027, so a new 4-year contract for Jordan, of course. Sean Dyche was, of course, speaking about Jordan Pickford today. In his press conference, he said, "I'm learning about Jordan. He's been very open about himself and how he feels here. We'll certainly be looking to rub off on him where we can." And he actually made a little bit of a mishap. Sean Dyche, he was speaking about Jordan Pickford and Jordan Pickford's comfortability in at the football club, and he said something along the lines of, well, he obviously is comfortable because he signed a new deal, and then he said, or he's close to signing a new deal. So, I don't know, maybe this is a done deal and it's just not being announced yet, or maybe that was just a slip of the tongue by the manager. We'll have to wait and see. Sean Dyche also said that he's a very good player, a good servant to this football club, and I'm going to continue to be that, I'm sure. I think it's a sign that he's enjoying the new regime and accepting of what we can offer. Fabrizio Romano also reported earlier on today that Everton are closing in on an agreement to extend Jordan Pickford's contract. The deal is at the final stages, and it's imminent. Pickford is keen on signing a new long-term deal with clauses and the final green light in the next few days. So this is positive news. Of course, this is positive news. Listen, I think when the reports were first sort of put out there a number of months ago that Jordan Pickford was amongst the Everton players that were looking to sign a new deal or renew their contract, I think there was a general sense of sort of happiness about that. That can't be said about certain other players that were also in that conversation, but certainly for Jordan Pickford, there seemed to be an overall feeling of joy that he was looking to commit his long-term future to this football club. Now, obviously, the big overriding question and the big overriding discussion point when talking about Jordan Pickford's new contract is we are not stupid. And by we, I don't just necessarily mean Evertonians, I just mean human beings, to be honest with you, and football fans are not stupid. And, we all are very, very aware that signing a new contract and committing your long-term future to a football club is nothing but a statement, and actually signing a new contract doesn't really guarantee anything other than the fact that the future of the player is more in control of the football club than what it would have been had he have not signed the deal. It doesn't mean that he won't leave the football club. It doesn't mean that he won't want to leave the football club. It doesn't mean that Everton won't want to sell him. It just means that there's more of a as I said, the ball is more in Everton's court if any of those situations happen to arise, whether it be the end of this season or the end of next season or whenever that may be. Now, having said that, for some reason, I do believe that Jordan Pickford is actually wanting to commit his long-term future to the football club and is happy at Everton. I think he's grown a lot at the football club over the years. I think he's learned a lot. I think he's matured a lot as a footballer, as a human being. He said it himself in a number of interviews before that, not only, growing up at the football club, but also the birth of his son and getting married and these various different situations that have happened in his life that have helped him grow up. And he seems to be comfortable where he is. He seems to be happy where he is. And as I said, there's an element of belief within me that does believe that Jordan Pickford actually wants to stay at Everton Football Club, regardless of what may or may not happen come the end of this season. But as I said, we're not stupid and we understand that the term, a new contract and pledges his future to the football club doesn't really mean anything other than the fact that financially, he will be getting a rise, which is good for him, and also that, Everton are more in control of whatever happens in the future for the player. But as I said, maybe it's just blind loyalty. Maybe it's because I really like Jordan Pickford. Maybe it's because, I'm looking at it from a positive standpoint. I do believe generally that he is happy at the football club, that he's settled, that he's not really looking elsewhere. But of course that could be a load of bollocks. We all know footballers are notorious for saying one thing or feeling one thing and then very quickly changing their minds and feeling another thing. Another big discussion point surrounding this has been the relegation release clause, or lack of relegation release clause as we now know it to be, according to Paul Dyche. A lot of the discussions prior to the information that's come out over the last 24 hours were really focused on whether or not there would be a relegation release clause in Jordan Pickford's contract, and ever since the news earlier on today that there wouldn't be a relegation release clause, there's been a very different opinions on what people think and how people feel. I'm really, really interested in this. I want to know what you all think in the live comments. If you're watching live, get your thoughts in the live comments. If you're watching the YouTube video, get your thoughts down below. But I've seen a couple of Evertonians say that they're not necessarily happy that there isn't a clause in there. I've seen a few Evertonians saying that they are happy that there's not a clause in there. One thing I would say is that, firstly, I don't think Everton would have any problem selling Jordan Pickford if they needed to. If it comes to a situation, and touch wood this doesn't happen, but if it comes to a situation where Everton are relegated this season and financially they simply cannot afford to keep a hold of somebody of Jordan Pickford's stature, on the wage that Jordan Pickford's on the length of the contract that Jordan Pickford's on, I don't think Everton would have any trouble in finding bidders for England's number one and for ultimately one of the best goalkeepers in the world, because that's what Jordan Pickford is. Jordan Pickford is a number one for his country, and his country at a country that generally compete, at the latter end of tournaments every time they're in there. He's a World Cup semi-finalist, he's a Euros finalist, he's a record-breaking goalkeeper at all levels, and he's been a Premier League goalkeeper for the last, 8-9 years, something like that. Even with Sunderland, when he was coming through, he was of that ilk. So I don't really think there's any worry if that situation, happened. And as I said, touch wood, it doesn't happen. But if that situation happened, I don't think this is a case of we'll be stuck with him and we won't be able to get rid of him. There's plenty of teams in this country and plenty of teams around the world that would happily take Jordan Pickford. Now, okay, we might be stung for the fee-wise because there's no relegation release clause in there, and it might mean that we don't get as much money as maybe we would have, but it's not like we're going to be sat here going, oh my God, we've got this player on loads of money a week, a big contract, and we can't get rid of him because he's one of the best goalkeepers in the world, so it wouldn't be a case of that. As I said, this is all worst case scenario. Hopefully it doesn't get to that. Hopefully Jordan stays for the foreseeable future, and Everton don't get relegated and we're a Premier League team next year, and hopefully we're not even having to have this conversation. However, what I'm saying is, there was let's draw a comparison. For example, so Alex Iwobi was in talks, or is in talks, with Everton for a new contract. Sean Dyche was actually asked about that today in his press conference. But Alex Iwobi's in talks with Everton for a new contract. Alex Iwobi's had a good season so far. He had a really, really good couple of months of the season. He's sort of died down a little bit since then, but he's still doing well. He's still getting assists. He's still working hard. He's still popping up in important moments. Now, he's in talks for a new Everton contract, a contract that will likely be a similar extension to Jordan Pickford, maybe 2-3 years, something like that. And will likely come with a salary raise. Now, I don't know what Alex Iwobi's current salary is. Let's say, for argument's sake, it's 100 grand a week, and let's say he gets a raise to 130 grand a week. Now, if Alex Iwobi is to sign a new contract without a relegation release clause in it, then the worry for Everton is if Everton go down, you've then got a player on 130 grand a week on a long-term contract who I think a lot of Premier League teams would be wary about taking a risk on. For multiple reasons, one of them being that he's been at the football club for 4 years, and 3 of those years have been absolute disasters. And okay, this past sort of few months, and assuming that Alex Iwobi continues in the same trajectory, the last year would have been good, but clubs would look and go, well, hang on, it's a massive risk. He's on a lot of money. They'll want a decent fee to get him out of there because he's just signed a new contract, and it's a risk that might not necessarily be worth taking. So if Alex Iwobi signed a new contract with Everton and there wasn't a relegation release clause, or there wasn't any sort of clause in there to suggest that, Everton would be financially covered if they needed to sell him, then that would be a slight concern for me. In the same way as it would have been had Anthony Gordon have stayed and signed a new contract, I'd be looking going, well, we're not guaranteed to be able to get rid of these players because it would take teams taking a punt on them. Jordan Pickford is in a very different situation for me. As I said, there's loads of teams that would take Jordan Pickford if Everton were to go down, and we're in a position to need to sell him. So I've got no real worry about the lack of relegation release clause because I don't think it'll really have an impact. What I do think it does is I think it sets a really, really, really good message. And by that, what I mean is, let's say Jordan Pickford signed a new contract with Everton tomorrow and there was a relegation release clause in there, and that gets put out to the media, and we're all sitting there and we're talking about Jordan's new contract, and all of a sudden we say, right, he's got a relegation release clause in there. That tells us off the bat, just looking at it black and white without going into any of the details, or even though a relegation release clause might be sensible for the football club or might be sensible for Jordan and might work and we mightn't be particularly upset or angry about it, just looking at it black and white, that tells us, well, firstly, Jordan's looking towards the future rather than the now. And secondly, it's almost like, well, if you go down, we know he's going to leave the football club anyway. Now, as I said, there's absolutely no guarantee if Jordan signs this contract and Everton go down that he stays. There's still every possibility that he could go, in the same way as there's every possibility he could go if there was a relegation release clause in the contract. However, if it was there, those discussions would be being had, and those discussions would be at the forefront of it. Well, yeah, he signed a new contract, but Everton are in trouble this season. If we go down, then he's probably not going to be here. Why is he looking towards the future? X, Y, and Z. Whereas without that clause in there, that narrative is all of a sudden a lot different. The narrative is now, he's all about Everton. He's not looking too far into the future. He's not worried about whether we go down. He's not concerned with what his future holds. He's just about Everton. He wants to play for Everton. He's happy here. He's settled here. He wants to sign. And all of a sudden, whilst we may have been understanding had there have been a relegation release clause in there, that for me creates just a negative energy surrounding the situation, because there's always that black cloud over it of, well, this clause is effectively saying that this contract means very little if Everton aren't able to stay up this season. Whereas without that clause in it, all of a sudden it's much more positive. It's a player that is one of the top players in his position in Wales football, is a really, really reliable footballer for the football club, almost single-handedly kept Everton in the Premier League at times last season, and he wants to stay at the football club. He wants to continue. He wants to, he wants to work with the new manager. He's settled. He wants to continue to represent this football club every week. The whole narrative is completely different without that clause in there. And even if the overall sort of, overriding situation isn't particularly different, because it's not. Because as I said, clause or no clause, if we go down, he still very much could leave or could stay. And clause or no clause, he could very much still be looking, thinking, well, I'm a Premier League top-level goalkeeper here, so if we go down, then, I might look elsewhere. But without the clause there, the message and the general feel of the situation is a lot more positive, and I think that's a really, really good thing. Overall, in terms of the contract itself, I think it's a positive. I think Jordan is a player that should be rewarded. There's definitely arguments for other players who are said to be in talks for new contracts, and whether or not they deserve it. Iwobi is obviously the big talking point because, of course, as we just mentioned, he's been very, very good for the last sort of year or so, but for the previous 3 before that, he wasn't particularly good, so that is definitely a conversation to be had. But I don't think there'll be many Evertonians out there that would, fight the argument that Jordan Pickford doesn't deserve a new contract and Jordan Pickford hasn't earned a new contract. As I said, there were times last season where that fella pretty much kept Everton in the Premier League, and even going back seasons and seasons ago, I can pick out many games where Jordan's kept us in it. But I was actually thinking the night before last about the Merseyside derby, at Anfield under Carlo Ancelotti when we beat them 2-0, and I was thinking about that for very obvious reasons, because Carlo Ancelotti once again turned up at Anfield and absolutely slapped them all over the place. But I was thinking specifically about that game and and what happened in that game, and Jordan was absolutely unbelievable in that game as well. He made 3 or 4 world-class saves that on another day and another goalkeeper wouldn't have made, and we wouldn't have won that game, in the way that we did. So Jordan, for me, absolutely deserves the contract. I'm made up that he's close to signing it, and as I said, I'm made up that it hasn't got a cloud over it of, well, there's a release clause in there. It's just purely, and it mightn't be this, because football is never as loyal or as on the face as this is, but it purely seems like he just wants to play for Everton. He's happy here, he wants to commit his future here, and he just wants to play for this football club, and that is a massive, massive positive, because I'm willing to bet my bottom dollar that if Everton are to remain in the Premier League this season, Jordan Pickford will have a massive, 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 he'll massively have something to do with that, in the same way as he massively had something to do with Everton staying in the Premier League last season as well. So it's players like Jordan that you need to keep at the football club, and if you can convince players like Jordan to want to stay at the football club, then that's an even better thing. The Blues says, with that, the game he made that save from Henderson's volley, absolute world class. It was, mate. It was, and he made a couple of other saves that were great, but that Henderson volley one was absolutely sublime, mate. Sublime. So yeah, it looks like Jordan is, only a matter of time away from signing his new deal. As I said, I wouldn't be particularly too worried about the lack of relegation release clause, because let's be honest, if push comes to shove and Everton are really in a desperate situation and need to sell players, England's number 1 goalkeeper isn't going to be somebody that we're struggling to get rid of, is he? Let's be honest. However, that isn't really the conversation we should be having, because ultimately the conversation we should be having is that he wants to stay at the football club, and the hope that Everton stay in the Premier League this season and Jordan Pickford continues to be our goalkeeper into the new stadium and beyond. Gang says, what about all the derby mistakes, lad? You're deluded. I'm not saying he's not made mistakes. I'm not saying he's not been poor. I'm not saying he's not had moments where we've sat there and gone, hang on. Jordan Pickford had a period, by the way, where I remember coming on this channel doing a news video and saying we need the new number 1 goalkeeper because Jordan Pickford isn't good enough. And I remember coming on and saying that, and he had periods where he was constantly making mistakes, and those conversations were being had. In the same way as that, when David De Gea first signed for Manchester United, he was absolutely dreadful. And I mean absolutely one of the worst goalkeepers I've ever seen when he first signed for Manchester United. And yet 14 years later, He's won league titles, European trophies, FA Cups, and he's still goalkeepers. And for a good period of that 14 years, he was one of the best goalkeepers in the world, if not the best goalkeeper in the world. Goalkeepers make mistakes, ultimately. Nick Pope is apparently the best goalkeeper ever to have lived. He's constantly making mistakes. I've watched them all the time make mistakes. Alisson is one of the best goalkeepers in the world. He was atrocious the other night against Real Madrid, same as Thibaut Courtois, who made a couple of really bad mistakes. Goalkeepers make mistakes. The reality is you have to look at Jordan Pickford and think, can we get a better goalkeeper than Jordan Pickford? For me, it's very easy. It's very, 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 very easy. Jordan Pickford doesn't make that save against Chelsea last season, the one that won him a save of the season. Then maybe Everton don't stay in the Premier League. Maybe Everton drop points there, lose confidence, and maybe Everton don't stay in the Premier League. I don't think there's another goalkeeper that realistically Everton could go out and buy that would have made that save. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. Jordan is one of the best goalkeepers in the world. Whether you want to like it or not, he seriously is. And why is it all right for other goalkeepers to make mistakes, but it's not all right for Jordan Pickford to make mistakes? I don't get it. Yeah, as I said, good news, positive news. And something that we can get excited about and something that we can be positive about. And Jake says he's amazing, but if we were in a desperate situation as last summer, I'd probably sell him. And like I said, mate, new contracts in football in this day and age don't mean anything. They don't mean that he's going to stay till 2027. They don't even mean that he'll still be here this time next year. But I do genuinely, and I'm not just saying this because I like him, and I'm not just saying this because it's Everton, but I do genuinely have a feeling that Jordan is happy here and wants to stay here. But to be fair, I had that same feeling about Richarlison, and I still to this day think Richarlison was happy here and wanted to stay here. But ultimately, he wanted to play Champions League football, and Everton needed the money as a matter of urgency. So, we had to do that. But no, overall, I'm happy about the deal. I'm not too fussed about the lack of release clause in the contract. And I think it's positive that one of our, if not our best players in terms of his technical ability as a footballer, is willing to commit his long-term future to the football club. That I really don't see how that can be viewed as anything other than a positive. I really, really don't. So, really positive news. Let's hope that, we hear the confirmation of that over the next couple of days so we can actually put it to bed, be happy about it, and move on. And let's hope Jordan Pickford has another absolutely world-class performance on Saturday against Aston Villa. Anyway, Sean Dyche has had his pre-game press conference today ahead of that game against Aston Villa. He started by paying tribute to John Motson, who of course sadly passed away today, or it was announced he passed away today. Legendary football commentator. Absolutely heartbreaking to wake up to that news today. The voice of football for many years. The voice of football for many people as well, who will know football commentary through John Motson and his years of dedication to his craft and ultimately his years of commentating on some of the greatest football matches that has been. Sean Dyche said, a legend on his voice alone, but when you met him a few times, as I had down the years, he was a tough fella as well. It's a sad loss, so of course I'd just like to extend that and send our love and thoughts and wishes to John's family and friends, because it's incredibly sad news, and as I said, really, really heartbreaking to wake up to. So nice of Sean Dyche to pay tribute there, of course. He was then asked about Everton's board. He said, he was asked about, is it difficult that basically you've come into a job and the board aren't at the games and the director of football wasn't there with you during your press conference? Is that difficult? And he said, they still speak to me, still connect with me. There's no problems at all from me. I speak to them when I need to. They send me messages and ask me questions when they needed to. So the lines of communication have been fine. He said, if there is a disconnect, we need to bring a reconnect because the fans are a massive part of this football club, the energy, the passion. So we need to try and find the right way of bringing it together. Listen, I appreciate the thought. I appreciate the message. I appreciate the sort of basis behind that. I appreciate what Sean Dyche is trying to say and ultimately trying to do, but it isn't going to happen. Let's be honest. The board have made their bed. They're done for me. They're completely done at this football club, all of them, and they simply have to be moved on and moved away, and a new people have to come in and replace them. I get what Sean Dyche is saying, and he can't come out ultimately and say, yeah, they fucked it, they'll never be back. But I really, really don't think there will ever be a reconnect between Evertonians and the likes of Bill Kenwright and Denise Barrett-Baxendale. I just don't think that will ever be there. As we mentioned, he spoke about Jordan Pickford's deal. He was asked about Dominic Calvert-Lewin and whether or not he'll be fit for Saturday's game. He said, I don't think so. He's building up well low. He's on the grass. He's not with us yet, but that'll come quickly. Our intention is to get him fit as possible. He was asked about the Alex Iwobi deal. Listen, pardon me, there's not really much to say on the Dominic Calvert-Lewin situation for me. If you'd have asked me yesterday, do I think Dominic Calvert-Lewin would be fit for this game, I'd have said no, probably not. Look, I don't know how many times I need to have my opinion on Dominic Calvert-Lewin. You all know my opinion on Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and it's still the exact same, and it won't change anytime soon. As I said, he was asked about the Alex Iwobi situation. He said, we're assessing every situation. Some have been ongoing like Jordan, so it's ongoing, looking at all situations, because we need to make sure all the good players we've got are still here. Very broad statement there. He was asked about a chat that Amadou Onana had with Stephen Defoe. He said, I just thought it was someone who'd be a very good player as a youngster to find that connection, get him to understand the things Stephen learns. I think it's a refreshing thing. I offered it to Ama and he was very open to it. So, as I said, very literal there. Amadou Onana's had a conversation with Stephen Defoe. He was also a midfield player in his day, and I think he's a coach now, I think Sean Dyche said. And again, just shows the behind the scenes work that Sean Dyche is putting in. He's willing to go out there and source external people to come and have conversations with players to maybe help them or help build their confidence, or maybe just open their eyes to a different way of playing or a different way of working, or whatever it may be. And hopefully that benefits Amadou Onana. He said he's still very young, still learning the game. All we're trying to do is fast track his learning and keep him improving, which is really, really positive as well. He was asked a various different amounts of questions, talking about Anders Townsend, talking about Jordan Pickford, talking about Seamus Coleman. We're not going to go through all of them because I don't want to bore you. But he was asked about the fines and the recent fines for Everton. He said, no one got sent off. There was nothing too malicious. I don't want to see it all the time, but it does happen from time to time. You can't ask for passion and then not accept when it comes. So, again, simple, really. Very literally, you can't say you want the players to be passionate, you want them to fight, you want them to battle, you want them to work hard, you want them to give everything, and then when they do that and they get into a bit of an altercation, and ultimately the FA run to fine Everton because that's just what they do apparently in this day and age. Have a go or say, oh no, you can't do that. It doesn't work like that. On them fines, we heard earlier today that Everton and Leeds United have been charged by the FA after both clubs failed to ensure that their players conducted themselves in an orderly fashion in Everton's 1-0 win over Leeds United last weekend. The full statement reads, Everton and Leeds United have both been charged for a mass confrontation that took place during the Premier League fixtures on Saturday the 18th of February. It is alleged that during the 42nd minute of the fixture, both clubs failed to ensure that their players conducted themselves in an orderly fashion and or failed to ensure that their players did not behave in a way which is improper and or provocative. Both clubs have until Monday the 27th of February to provide their respective responses. We also heard from the FA, I think it was a couple of days ago, 2 or 3 days ago, regarding the Merseyside derby. I will read that one out for you now. Bear with me 2 seconds. They said that Everton and Liverpool have been fined £40,000 and £25,000 respectively for a mass confrontation that took place during their Premier League match on Monday the 13th of February. Both clubs admitted that they failed to ensure their players and benches conducted themselves in an orderly fashion and refrained from provocative behaviour during the 86th minute. Independent regulatory commission imposed their fines during a subsequent hearing, and its written reasons will be published in due course. Why Everton were fined more than Liverpool, I don't know. I've read a rumour that it's something to do with the Crystal Palace game towards the back end of last season, and the fact that Everton, had already been in a bit of a sticky situation with the FA. I don't really know. Personally, for me, I think every one of these situations should be taken individually, and if Everton are being fined for something, then Liverpool should be fined for the exact same amount of money, in the same way as that Everton and Leeds should be fined in the same way amount of money. But let's be honest, these people and these organisations and these companies absolutely love Liverpool Football Club, and they will do anything to protect protect Liverpool Football Club and make sure Liverpool Football Club are happy. So they're not going to do that, are they? Because their best interest is how can we make them happy. Yeah, as I said before at the start of the video, really, really weird this for me. Not necessarily weird because Everton are being fined, because, look, listen, you all know my feelings on the Premier League, on the FA, on FIFA, on all of these organisations. I think they're as bent as it possibly comes. I think they're as corrupt as anything. And I think there is 100% agendas surrounding these companies and these organisations of who finishes where, who plays in Europe, who doesn't play in Europe, this, that and the other. I have seen other teams being fined for this behaviour and other teams being fined for various different things. I just think it's really weird because prior to last season, I never really remembered anybody being fined, and maybe that's just because it wasn't as publicised on social media and wasn't as talked about on social media. Maybe it's because it never happened and this is a new thing. I don't know, but it just seems at the moment that these, the FA specifically are handing out fines left, right and centre for pretty much anything, which is a bit mad really, because as I said, 24 months ago, 3 years ago, I never really seen this at all. And maybe that's just because I wasn't following FA Sports spokesperson on Twitter, so I didn't see it come up. Or maybe this is because it's a new thing. But yeah, listen, ultimately, as Sean Dyche said, in his message, although he obviously clouded it by saying you don't want to see it all the time and this, that and the other, the reality is we can't sit here and ask for passion and ask for fight and ask for, all of that, and then when you get that and when you give that, moan about it because we're being fined. For me, I don't give a fuck. I know some people are saying, oh, but, it's £40,000 and this, that and the other, and, what happens to our transfer budget and this, that and the other. It's very unlikely to have any impact on Everton's potential to bring in players. Having said that, we didn't sign anybody in January because we were skint, so maybe it does have an impact. But if it does, then obviously that's a different conversation. But if it doesn't, then fine us every week. I'd rather see Everton turn up in a game of football, show a bit of fight, show a bit of aggression, show a bit of passion, get a fine for it, but come out with 3 points, than not do that, roll over and be beaten comfortably as we have done, however many times over the course of the last 6-7 months or so. So, we've had a hat-trick of fines, 3 on the bounce, Arsenal, Liverpool and Leeds, and listen, if it means we've got to get another one on Saturday to win that game, then give us another one on Saturday. I don't give a fuck. As long as we win games of football, I'm not asked. Again, I think it's a bit petty, to be honest, from the FA to constantly fine football clubs for let's be honest, situations that are nothing. The situation with Leeds was a little altercation, a couple of yellow cards got given out. There maybe could have been a red card in there if the referee was any decent at doing his job. There wasn't. It happened. We moved on and we go again. In the same way as that with Arsenal, a little altercation, they got up, we moved on, and the game went on again, and all the players shook hands at the end of the game. That's what I don't get. I can guarantee you that Dwight McNeil and Weston McKennie would have shook hands after the game, or Weston McKennie would have shook hands with a number of Everton players, and Dwight McNeil would have shook hands with a number of Leeds players. So why is the all of a sudden fines being thrown out? Why is it all of a sudden being blown in? I get it, the whole failure to conduct your team and all that nonsense, but this is part of football. Part of football is that emotion. Part of football is a contact sport. You're going to have situations where players aren't happy with each other, and as I said, it for me, it completely it just undermines the referees, and we all know the referees in this league are absolutely atrocious and awful at their job. But if you're effectively saying we're going to fine these football clubs if they can't conduct their players, then what you're effectively saying is also the referee has got no control over that situation. Because if a club's being fined for failure to conduct their players, then the overall assumption would be that that's a pretty serious situation that's led to sendings off, and that's led to a referee being in a bad position or whatever. It wasn't. It was a bit of a scuffle that happens, in every week in every football match. So you're effectively undermining the referees by saying, use it that shit, you couldn't control the game. Why aren't the referees being fined for failing to control the game, by the way? Why isn't the referee being fined for not booking Meslier, despite the fact that he was the third player over, and in the new rules it states that the third player over gets booked? I don't know. I think it's nonsense. I think it's over the top. I don't think it needs to be done. And as I said, if it means Everton win every week, then fucking fine us, set up a GoFundMe page, and I'm sure we'd all be happy to throw a fucking tenner in there a week or something, if it means that this Everton team actually starts to show a little bit of grit and fight and battle and hard work every week. But there you go. That's pretty much it. I don't think there's much more to talk about. As we mentioned, we've spoken about Jordan's contract, we've spoken about Sean Dyche's press conference, we've spoken about the fines as well. We are going to leave it there. If you have enjoyed this one, please do leave a like. Massive thank you to everybody for watching in the live comments. I really do appreciate it. If you're watching as a YouTube video, then please do leave your thoughts in the comment section down below, and we'll get involved with as many of them as we possibly can as well. We will be back tomorrow with the game preview to that game against Aston Villa, so don't forget to join us for that one as well. And then, of course, we'll have all of the post-game content on Saturday. But until then, massive thank you all for watching. Leave a like if you have enjoyed it. Subscribe if you are new, and we'll see you soon.